You need someone who knows what the iron stage is. You need someone who knows what pleasure is. You need someone who knows what it means to play soccer, to play tennis, not so much to smoke or drink, but the basic pleasures of life, that how they come about, in what sense, and how they become attracted to this. But they've also been able to overcome it organically as well as being forced until they get to a place of bronze. That if down here you have your relationship with money, your relationship with time is casual and relatively stupid and idiotic, when you get to the bronze, you also realize that instead of having spent your money on booze and various other ridiculous things, you could have saved and buy yourself a car so you could haul your tiny little behind to school. When you get to the bronze, you understand the nature of displeasure and you become disgusted by it. You hate yourself. You have a good amount of regret. You graduate to bronze. In bronze, you go to school. You take the stuff somewhat seriously, not because your instructors are fun, not because they're exciting or inspiring, but because for the first time you realize the importance of having a degree, of having a job that's beyond in and out in Home Depot. Okay? So you understand money, its power, what it can or can't do for you. And up here, when you have money, you come back to the world of pleasure and you pick and choose your pleasures carefully now. If here you spend your money on, say, drinking and smoking and those things, here perhaps you spend your money on buying nice clothes, so when you go to your job, you can look a little bit more attractive and decent. Now, then you get to the silver, you realize that you've been a single prick, selfish for the most of your life. For the first time now, there is this opening inside you where you want to share your physical body, you want to share your physical goods, you want to share your emotional history and intellectual history with someone, i.e. a companion, i.e. a support system, i.e. a wife or a husband, i.e. a spouse. Here you have kids, you realize that they turn your life upside down. Maybe they're good, maybe they're no good, but nevertheless, for the first time you understand what a family life or what a community is. Okay. There comes a point where you realize this is your physical life. It's what we call the life of a sleepwalker. And I put sleepwalker because the forces in these three areas are so great that if you want to be aware, if you want to be mindful, if you want to keep negative emotions at bay, none of those things are possible. In the three stages, life just comes to you and pushes you this way and that way, and for the most part, you have no control of anything except to just always be engaged in damage control. Okay? Now, some of us, easier than others, if you still have your youth about you, your health about you, if you still have patience and interest and energy, you get to a place of complete disgust and you divorce these three areas. And by divorce, I don't mean that you completely walk away. Something about your interior finds itself very, very detached from your body and all that it has. You don't care about your shoes, you don't care about your car, you don't even care about your job. I only have three. You have a bag full. You're rich. Now, once you divorce this, and what makes this so difficult is that these three areas have been your GPS through life. If you're 25 and you've been guided by these different areas, it doesn't mean you don't think and reflect about the big questions of life. You do, but at the end of the day, these three areas will have you and put you back to sleep. When you begin to lose desires for the things that you have, it's like a drowning man. You keep going deeper and deeper in this dark pool of water, and you want to pull yourself up, but you can't. It's impossible. Sex is no longer fun. Having ridiculous conversations with your friends is no longer fun. Money, all of a sudden, instead of it making you powerful, you kind of feel yourself to be pathetic, that you've wasted most of your life just saving money, but there is nothing really to spend it on that's valuable for you. Then you look at perhaps your wife or your husband, your companion, you look at your kids and you realize Your kids, I mean, look, you guys have left your parents, you're pursuing your own dreams and goals. That's what happens to parents. Ultimately, they create, and what they create would leave them. I'm not saying that you're not nice enough to call them once in a while and say, hello, how you doing, mom or dad? But for the most part, parents are always left alone. And then you look at your wife, you look at your husband, and you realize, yeah, ultimately everybody is deep down quite alone. And then you realize that there isn't much really to talk about with your companion. You have lost this, you have lost this, and you have lost this. It's like Satan has entered in your life, like the book of Job, destroyed your animals, destroyed your land, destroyed your children. You don't even care for your wife or husband anymore. And now you say to yourself, I live for what exactly? Your senses become completely useless. And you need to understand how important that is. Your eyes are meant to go out there, see things that are attractive, and then pursue them. There is a scene in Into the Wild, I think, that this kid has been in the wild for a while, comes to the city, and he has his backpack, he hasn't showered, he looks dirty and smelly and stinky, I suppose. And he's looking into this restaurant, and people are dressed really nicely. They're sitting, having good food and laughing. And he has an image of himself, in fact, sitting in the restaurant with a suit and a tie and having a good time. But all of a sudden, disgust comes over him, and he just leaves immediately. And that's the thing, that you realize you've been there, you've done that. It's no longer fun or interesting. And it's such a devastating place to be. And so there's a good amount of depression, loneliness, and anger, if you can read those things. And, two things, you can get to this place in two ways. You can go to school, you can get a degree, you can make money, you can have a family, then at the age of 40 or 50, you kind of come to this realization that your life really means nothing. And then you become very, very poor inwardly. And then you become unreachable to your kids, you become unreachable to your husband or to your wife. And then you try to read books, you go to therapy, you take medication of sorts. That's one way that you come to this place of complete darkness. The other is kind of like, I had a student a long time ago. She was only 17. Maybe you'll meet her. She's in fact the person who does all the videos and postings of the talks. She just signed up for a class. She had nothing better to do. It was a summer class. She was only 17. And you're very impressionable when you're young. And so she became interested in the class and the idea. She became interested in Persian poetry, in the Persian language, the Persian culture. She, in fact, took classes. She learned how to speak Persian. And she was in all of our gatherings for about 10 years. But the idea has broke her in a good way. Sometimes bad, but the idea has broken nevertheless. And now she is, I think, almost 40. She has a PhD in philosophy and religious study. She teaches. She has a husband. She has a beautiful daughter. At this age, she doesn't need medication. She understands the nature of just being human. And so when you're broken by someone at a very young age, or even an old age, but they can guide you in some sort of a direction, you'll get depressed, but your depression, for the most part, is going to be protected by the person who broke you. If you're broken by life, life does not care to protect you. That's not what the function of life is. Okay? So if you're broken by life, in this culture, you'll seek therapy and then medication. If you're broken by a teacher, you may also need therapy and medication, but there's a good chance that if there is a good support system, you're genuine, the teacher is genuine, then, you can kind of end up like Job at a certain point. Now, Above this is gold. In other words, you begin to ask some very, very difficult questions at different stages of your life. There is the desert here. Now, what you need to understand about the desert life is, if you're Muhammad, your desert is going to the caves and sitting there for hours in the darkness and screaming and shouting, figuring out who the hell you are and what's happening to you. If you're Moses, you lose your identity and you wander into deserts for about 40 years. If you're Jesus, you go into the desert to wrestle with Satan, or you just leave the house at the age of 12 to figure out what the hell is happening to you. The point I'm trying to make, the desert life, always a symbolic, or like Gilgamesh, a symbolic of you leaving all aspects of your physical life and pursuing your spiritual life. Okay? Now, in the desert, all you have is a scorching sun. In the desert, all you have are scorpions and reptiles. In the desert, there are no oases. In the desert, it's only you. Now, usually, a lot of people kind of just turn around and go back to either the iron or the bronze or silver, because the desert life is really, really quite difficult to survive. Okay? One of the best books, again, for those of you who are interested, Daughter of Fire. It's about someone who thinks that they know. They go to India, they find someone, and they get broken, and they remain broken for about 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years until they find an oasis. Okay? Now, the goal, let's just say, is you're selfish, but now you're selfish in a different way. If here you want to know what gives your body pleasure, if here you want to know how you can assume power so your body can live in a relatively more comfortable environment, if you go here and you see comfort of your body, of your emotions, of your mind, here, it's all about your soul. It's all about finding who you really are on the inside. And when you get to this place where you ask these questions, you realize none of these physical activities can provide you any answers. Okay? Now, the goal is you having become selfish because it's only about your soul. Conversations about your soul. Physical places you want to frequent that bring your soul to life. Now, there comes a point here, the gold stage, you become profoundly arrogant. Maybe you've had a couple of experiences like St. Augustine, St. Aquinas, and you think that you know a lot than other people, so you kind of just push people around. After gold, you get to a place of transcendence. And by transcendence, I mean you no longer really care. You don't care about the questions, you don't really care about the answers, you don't care about the journey. Your job is done. After the transcendence, you get to a place called unification. And what makes unification interesting is the following. Because you have gold on the inside, and when you get to the gold, you become like diamond here. Okay? You've been in the belly of darkness for many, many, many months and years. Something about you has become unbreakable. You become a stoic. You live, you have lots of wants, but you have no needs. Nothing out there can define who and what you are. You are your own definition. You are the living Bible. You don't follow religion. You are the creator of religion. Okay? Unification means the following then. Human beings are meant to have pleasure. There is nothing wrong with physical intimacy. But can you breathe life into it? Instead of having sex and making it iron, can you transform sex, making it gold? It's about an experience. There is nothing wrong with making money, having power. Can you use it for good? Help people. Help your parents. Okay? There is nothing wrong with having a family. Okay? Your wife or your spouse will harass you. And you will know what to do with the emotions. You become very passive. Yes, honey, I'll take out the garbage. Yes, honey, you're right. It's all about yes, 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 yes. One of the Gospels that you guys don't have access to, or at least haven't read, is called the Gospel of Barnabas. They asked Jesus an interesting question. Someone goes to him and says, what's the most noble thing that someone can do? Or what's the most difficult thing? Swallowing one's anger, he said. When you have a good amount of negative experience or negative emotion because of an experience that's unpleasant, you become very, very angry. And what do we do when you're angry? Well, you want to write it out. Maybe you want to lash it out. You want to beat someone up. And what Jesus says, swallow it. Don't allow the emotions to come up in thinking, in writing, or in talking, or physically manifesting itself like Mike Tyson. Okay? So unification has to do with someone who's gone through all these stages, know what they are, spend a good amount of time in darkness. Eventually, they were lucky enough to have what we call a breakthrough, where they had a glimpse of certain things, and then they come back down, and they talk about pleasure, but it smells different. They talk about money and power, but it smells different. That it seems like everything that they talk about and everything they touch has this alchemical reaction. آنان که خاک را به نظر کیمیا کنند، آیا بود که گوشه چشمی به ما کنند؟ You know, when you fall in love, something really interesting happens. Usually when we run into people, our eyes like meet and nothing. It's okay, hey, what's going on? And you pass them by. But when you fall in love, it's like you have this desire to hold their hand. You have this desire to be in their presence. But at the same time, there's a good amount of shaking within you that's taking place. You are nervous, your voice shakes, your body shakes a little bit. And all of a sudden you realize, well, you know, who is exactly sitting across the room from you? It's just a guy or a gal. They pee, they poop, and they eat. They do all sorts of crazy things. They're stupid like everybody else. And yet, because you're in love, you see them more than simply a piece of meat. And because of that experience, there is something about you that fears and trembles. Okay? So again, beware of those who come to you, who are able to kind of, with their gaze, turn iron into gold, and bronze into gold, and silver into gold. That's what they do. Now, good teachers have all of this. They're very practical people. Okay? They're not like some of these new age teachers who tell you, oh, don't think, have no thought. Well, that's stupid. You know, don't think about your past. Are you kidding? You can learn from it. Don't think about your future. Are you kidding? We're future-oriented animals. The point I'm trying to make, find people who are in this particular stage of life where they can kind of bring all these different stages together. Okay? Now, when you find someone like this, and remember, you can think about why, you can't understand why you feel a certain way towards these people. Something about you intuits that you just like them. You don't know why, you just like them. It may be within a couple of minutes, or it can take 4 or 5 or 6 months. Now, Upanishad means sitting at the feet of a teacher. Now, feet represents what? Well, you go to the bathroom with your feet. You walk on dirt with your feet. You go to the bar with your feet. Your foot takes you the dirtiest, the crummiest of places. Why do you sit at the feet of your teacher? Because you have come to a place where you realize you're lower than dust. You're more insignificant than dirt. So much so that you're unworthy to be stepped upon by your teacher. So it's the ultimate act of humility and passivity. Okay? Now, the other thing about sitting at the feet of your teacher is that you will allow him or her to walk all over you and you will not complain at all. Can you be exploited? Yes. Can you be manipulated? Yes. Can you be led astray? Yes. Could your life turn into poison? Yes. In the 1960s, 70s, and even now, there have been lots of people who kind of pretend to be teachers and they do all sorts of crazy things. And at the end of 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you realize you've been deceived, you've been lied to, and your life is ruined. That's why it's always good for students to doubt. That's why it's always good for students to fear and to ask lots of questions, to take one step forward and take 5 more steps forward and maybe half a step back. That was a joke. Okay, now. There are 4 things that will take place when you work with a teacher. The only way that you will find yourself at the feet of anyone is when you love them. And you can't love anyone that quickly. It's impossible because they mess your life so much that it's difficult to like them or even love them. So what usually happens, and I'll put this stuff down, something about the person that you meet, you find very, very attractive because we are rational, because all of us in this class play chess in the sense that we kind of try to figure out why things are happening. We're in the process of kind of discovering. You try to use your rationality, you try to use your history to figure out why you're attracted to some person. But the thing you need to know that there is no proper explanation, adequate explanation as to why you're attracted, okay? Now, should the dragon of doubt not destroy the seed of attraction as you spend more time with the person or the teacher you're working with? You become a bit more curious. In curiosity, you pay more attention, you become more aware, you become more mindful as to how you should be or not be around this particular person. And you begin to ask questions. It doesn't mean you understand your questions, but you're just more involved. Your curiosity turns into interest. Now remember, as you move up the ladder, your relationship with your teacher becomes more and more intimate and more monogamous. In other words, you can't just go to other people and ask questions and talk. It doesn't work that way. The presence of this particular person has contaminated you. You can't walk anywhere else except where this person is. Okay? Now, at every stage, it has its own unique fears and doubts. It's not a free ride. It's not going to be comfortable. You're always going to be worried. You're always going to be fearful. Why? Because as you move up, you lose some things from your life. And the things you lose, some of them you're very attached and you very much enjoy them. Okay? Now, then what happens is there comes a point where you are infatuated. And remember again, the more you move up the ladder, the more passive you become. Infatuation means to some extent you have lost about 80% of your willpower. You don't want to go to his house, but there is no place else to go, so you go. You want to call your friends and have a good time with them, but you realize, well, no, I'd rather just be home and just sulk in my depression. Okay? Infatuation, again, it means then that you don't really have very much power about yourself and about your life. Most of what lives inside you is a teacher you're working with. Then you have obsession. Obsession means that about 90-95% of who and what you are is occupied, invaded by your teacher. His or her will, his or her desires. Now, one of the things you need to understand is your relationship with your teacher is always, always, always going to be unequal. Your teacher will always have more power than you, will always have more power than you. Now, the way it usually works, especially in this culture, is this. There is only really one type of relationship that Americans know, and that's romanticism. That when you spend a lot of time with some stranger, eventually you begin to like them, then you become infatuated with them, then you're obsessed over them, and there comes a point where you love them. And love is a very possessive, very self-centered, very selfish. It contains a great amount of selfish and possessive emotions within it. Okay, so you want to just hold on to this person. And you don't want them to go anywhere. You want all of their attention. If I was to give you a couple of, maybe one or two or maybe 10 examples, I remember the three of us, Hussein, Mehrdad, and myself, were sitting, and the person who was guiding the gatherings, his name was also Hussein. Now, these are just 3-4 guys sitting in a room. There were only maybe in the 10 years that I was there, maybe 1 or 2 instances where they had a couple of women only there for a gathering because they were curious. Now, sometimes Hussein felt something about my friend Mehrdad. And for the 6-7 hours that we were sitting there, and he was talking, we were listening, Hussein made eye contact with Mehrdad. And Mehrdad would always go this way or this way, as all of us would, because when you love someone and when you feel intensely about them, you can't stand the way they look at you. It's too much. You want to explode at times. Or you want to cry, you want to laugh, or you want to just jump and slap them or something. And so you're sitting there and Hussein keeps looking at Mehrdad and you say to yourself, I am pissed. I'm really, really angry. I've known Mehrdad for 20 years, yes. I've also known Hussein for 5 years. Would it kill him to just look at me for a second? I too exist, I just came and cleaned your shop. Why do you keep looking at Mehrdad? And then you become jealous. And then you become envious. And then you become angry. So most of the human emotions that you and I have, you will also carry into this environment. And the point I'm trying to make is, just in case you find yourself in such situations, it is natural. To give you another cheesy example, before I did surgery on my vocal cords, because I used to sing Persian traditional music, as you can tell, I have a beautiful voice. So everywhere I would go, people would say, Amir, can you sing? I said, sure. And because Persian music is very, very sad, and we'll talk about that when we get to Islam, the lights would be turned off, and I would sing, and people would just cry. That's what Persian music does sometimes. And so once in a while, we would have guests at our gatherings who would play the sitar or santur better than I, and sometimes they would sing. And then other people would say, wow, that's beautiful singing, Joe. Can you sing some more? And I'm sitting in the background saying, what? I am the son of this gathering. How dare do my friends tell the stranger to sing again? And so you kind of become a little angry, but then time passes and you realize you no longer really want to shine, you no longer want to sing. It's time for other people to kind of put forth their creative aspects and just sing or dance or whatever they want to do. And in fact, you have no desire to go behind the microphone and sing. And so the point I'm trying to make is sometimes when you have this understanding that the jealousy, the envy, the possessiveness that you and I exercise in these three in this world, we also bring in this world. We are still novices. You still want the attention of your teacher, all of his or her attention to yourself and no other. Okay? Now, then you get to a place of love. That's the first thing. Without love, you don't have the capacity to survive the hurricane of your teacher's presence, his physical presence, emotional presence, intellectual presence, and spiritual presence. It is awesome. They will always tell you you are wrong, and the truth is you are. They will always tell you you're stupid, and the truth is you are. And if you don't have enough love inside you, you're going to say, man, I've been beaten up tonight. I'm never going to go back there. So the only component that will protect your relationship with your teacher is if you have enough love. If you have love, it'll allow your teacher to abuse you. And by abuse, I mean this. Whatever addiction you have here, it's through his abuse that you will lose your addiction to the high iron stage. If you have enough love, he will abuse you to get rid of your attachments in the bronze or the silver. It'll be much easier for you to walk away from your own past if you love. Okay? Now, if this is a little too difficult to abstract to grasp, consider it this way. You have, who was it? Pavarotti? Yeah, the opera singer. So he's about like 98. I don't really know how old he was way back then. And there was this young woman, she was like 28 or 30. There was like a 30 or 40-year gap between them. One day, her boss comes to her office and says, we have some guests from someplace. They really enjoy this particular singer, Pavarotti. Can you take him over there so they can hear him sing? And she says, really, can't I take him to hear Beyonce? Does it need to be Pavarotti? Yeah, Pavarotti. They hate Beyonce. In fact, Beyonce wasn't born way back then. So they go, they sit for about 4, 5, 6 hours. They hear this man sing, and then they look at this person and say, can you take us to the backstage so we can at least say hello to Pavarotti and maybe get his signature? Yeah, okay. I remember Pavarotti was married for, 30, 40 years. He had kids, fame, reputation, his name. And so they go back and they all say hello. And Pavarotti looks at this girl, says hello, and the girl says hello back. And all of a sudden, there are these sparks. And the girl doesn't really understand what's happening to her, but they exchange numbers and they go out. And then they go out some more, and then they go out some more, and they go out some more. At a certain point, Pavarotti looks at this girl and says, I love you. And the girl looks at him and says, I love you as well. And the girl looks at Pavarotti and says, but you're married. Nothing can withstand the force of love. He goes home, looks at his wife and says, maybe he sings it to her, I no longer want to be with you. It makes it more poetic. And she's devastated, of course, but the point I'm trying to make, that you have all this money, you have all this fame, the idea that this 67-year-old man has fallen victim to love, to a 30-year-old, is devastating for someone as famous as he. But nevertheless, because he fell in love, he didn't care for his name. He didn't care for his fame. He didn't care for his reputation, for his money, for his riches, for how devastated his wife and his kids were. He just left. And that's the thing you need to understand about love. Once you fall in love, you will allow yourself to be harassed, you will allow yourself to be abused, and you will never, ever, ever complain. It doesn't mean that you won't complain once in a while. And now, because it is an unequal relationship, you want to possess your teacher, but he or she is not meant to be possessed by anyone. The only person who is able to possess a teacher is the love that lives in him and the wisdom that lives in him. He exercises humility to these two only. This is what he adores. Okay? And students go to him first to fall in love. Then love pushes them into this darkness. If they can survive the darkness, if love finds the students worthy, wisdom will be revealed to them. Okay? Now, so remember, the first path in Hinduism is called Bhakti Yoga. And remember what I said on Monday? Yoga means two things, initially opposing forces, slowly coming together very harmoniously and joining one another, completing one another. The student completes the teacher by being receptive, and the way you're receptive is by being passive, and the way you're passive is by loving. Okay? And the way the student is completed, he or she finds himself in the presence of perfection. Okay? Now, once you find yourself in love with a teacher, what you have is a one-to-one, very personal, intimate relationship. And that's where what we call Jnana Yoga is what we call yoga of wisdom or yoga of knowledge. But the truth is, yoga of knowledge and wisdom have to wait. The Hindus have it the wrong way. You enter into this thing called Raja Yoga. Now, it's a yoga of every single teacher has his or her specific exercises that will make the yoga or the joining together more intense, getting the students ready for darkness. And in darkness there is longing, in darkness there is pain, and when you have longing and pain, automatically, organically, you are made to pray. You're forced to pray. You ask for help. Okay? Now, sometimes the only help that can be given you is you call your teacher at 2 a.m, you just go to their house and you just sit. Okay? And let me tell you a story. Do you have any questions? Excellent. So there is this young kid. He is at the iron stage. His friends call and say, you know, Snoop Dogg is singing or rapping. I don't know what Snoop Dogg does, but you're going to go listen to him or watch him? I have tickets, free. Yeah, of course. As they're walking, they walk past this church. The gates are open. This young kid says, what's that noise? Who's that guy who's screaming? He puts his head inside and he hears this man giving a sermon. And his other friend says, come on, man, we're late. Snoop is going to be done. Is that gum? Snoop is going to be, thank you. Snoop is going to be done. Can we go in and before he's finished? The guy says, yeah, just give me 5 more minutes. They're sitting there. he's just sitting there, and the friend ultimately says, why don't you go? I just rather sit and listen to this man talk. It's a very strange thing. You're a kid. I always fantasize about going to a Snoop Dogg concert. But all of a sudden, this guy who's giving this religious sermon has overtaken you and has created this new desire inside you. So after 5 hours, when the sermon is finished, this young kid goes to this guy and says, I'm so inspired and transformed by the things you've talked about. Can I be your student? Good teachers are not going to be deceived easily. So this old man looks at this young kid and says, of course, I will take you as a disciple. When do you want to join? Right now. Are you sure? Yes. Okay. The mosque here or this building has about 50 bathrooms. Can you go clean them? Clean the toilets? I want wisdom. Oh, yes, I understand you want wisdom. But for now, do me a favor. Can you clean the toilets? My father is Donald Trump. I understand, that's good for you, but you still say you want to be my disciple, yes? Yes. And you like the sermon? Yes. And you say you have fallen in love with me? Yes. Can you do the toilets? Okay. Now, you're this young kid, you have all these hopes and ambitions about you, you have all these desires, but you've also fallen victim. You've been stung by the demon of love. And now all you do is you clean the toilets. And you go to the guy after like 2 weeks and say, they're all clean now. Say, yeah, but when you got to the 50th one, all 49 were used again. Can you maybe clean them again? Again? No. Okay then, I'm sorry then, go home. But can I at least listen to you talk? No, just clean the toilets. Okay. For 2 years, this kid just cleans toilets. You need to think of yourself so low. You have to have so much humility and so much insignificance. But more importantly, you have to have so much love for this person that you're willing to just clean the toilets. And he does. And so when the 2 years are over, he says, well, can I now come and at least sit and listen to you talk? Yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't you do that? As he's ready to sit in the main hall, the teacher looks at him and says, wait a minute. Our kitchen floor is very, very, very dirty. It's a big kitchen. Can you clean that before you come over? Yeah. And he's never been into the kitchen. He doesn't know the size of the kitchen. He walks in, and it's like a football field. And the only thing he has to clean the grounds or the floor is a toothbrush. Well, this is going to take me like years. I understand. But it's okay. Now remember, as you're washing the toilets, as you're cleaning the floors, you have to wrestle with the doubts. You have to wrestle with the fears. You have to wrestle with the fact that you signed up to go to the main hall and listen, but here you are washing toilets, cleaning the floors. Remember what we talked about, Yajur Veda, the Veda of sacrifice? Are you willing sacrifice to become good at something? Become really good at least what we call love. Become really good at wisdom. Because nothing good can be given to anyone cheaply. It doesn't work that way. And so, he washes the floors for about 2 years, and then the teacher comes to him and says, I think you're ready now. And as they walk to the main hall, the teacher taps him on the shoulder and says, I forgot. Can you make tea for all of our guests in the main hall? Well, how many teas? About 1,000 cups. 1,000 cups? That's going to take me like 5 hours. I'm going to miss another sermon. So he has to make tea for the guests for another like 2-3 years. That period passes, and he's ready to come and sit and listen. And the teacher looks at him and says, can you serve tea to the guests in the main hall? Now, the funny thing about serving tea is this. You go to the kitchen, you pour tea in these cups, you bring them to the main hall, and as you give tea to the guests, once in a while you can kind of hear what the teacher is saying, and your love increases. There is this beautiful poem, Mara mibini o har dam ziyadat mikonid dardam, to ra mibinam o har dam ziyadat mishavad mailam, be darmanam nemiporsi nemidanam che sardari. I'm sorry, به سامانم نمی کوشی نمیدانم چه سر داری به درمانم نمی کوشی نمیدانی مگر دردم. That the teacher looks at me and my pain increases tenfold. I look at my teacher and my desire for him increases tenfold. Isn't that great? Now, after like 15 years of doing toilets and floors and serving tea, and the teacher says, now you're ready to sit back and listen. Now here's the thing you need to understand. By the time you're able to sit in the main hall, you know how to be patient. You know how to be forgiving. You know how to serve. Give your ears to your teacher. Without questions, without complaints, just sit back and listen. The toilets taught you that. The floors taught you that, okay? But he's not going to sit in the front row. He's pushed to sit way in the back. 2 years pass by, and when you're sitting way in the back, and we're not talking about times where there are electronics or technology, you can't really hear much. But the only thing you can do is just sit back and look at this old guy who's ugly with a long beard. Okay?